Just want to congratulate the protesters
and Canadians, as it turns out, have donated
$32
million to help Syrian refugees. That money will go to UNICEF. The federal government is going to top it up to $100 million, bringing Canada's total to $860 million in humanitarian assistance to Syria and Iraq. A more modest donation to Canada's own humanitarian crisis in Attawapiskat today. Ontario's pledging $2 million to provide youth services on the remote reserve. And as the full weight of the suicide crisis spreads, we learned today that a multi-million-dollar federal program that might have helped was canceled by the Conservatives in 2014. CTV's senior political correspondent Glenn McGregor explains.
1,000 kilometers away, the crisis in Attawapiskat is simulated on the floor of a government office, with a die-in to highlight the staggering number of suicide attempts.
If this happened in the city of Toronto, these kids would have access to innumerable resources. They need their help today, and that is why we are here.
Today, some small help was promised, as the government of Ontario pledged $2 million to fund nurses, security staff, and a youth center in the remote community. The federal government, though, repeating the funding announcement from last month's budget.
All right, I want to weigh in here. The problem with that is what that means is they're paying a whole bunch of people. They're making a bunch of jobs for a bunch of people who are not starving and who are not facing crippling poverty to go into an area where people basically are starving and treat them as if all their problems are the result of abuse, mental health issues, and addiction, and it's which is not going to solve the problem. So this whole approach is really the same type of thing that the government applies to poor people all over Canada, which is ignore their poverty, treat their problems as just treat them as a psych case, and ignore the fact that they are literally starving.
Hopefully, as we begin to roll out the dollars from this budget in terms of housing that has been a problem in Attawapiskat for a very long time, water, all of those things.
And now, questions about federal money that might have helped. The Aboriginal Healing Foundation was set up after another rash of suicides in Davis Inlet in the 1990s. Using money from a residential school settlement.
See, this is the type of there's some programming that really is helpful, that really is sustainable, and really is put together by the community. That kind of programming needs to have proper support. It's easy to support it, but as you can see, austerity fucked them over.
It supported 1,500 projects aimed at mental health issues in Indigenous communities. But funding was cut off in 2014 by the Conservative government. All programs canceled and support lines shut down.
It's more sad when you look at what's happening in Attawapiskat today. Just the very notion that we might have been able to do some good and help, especially for the kids that are there today, it does give you pause.
Amid the debate over money, the most compelling words come from a 16-year-old girl in Attawapiskat who tried to take her own life and whose sister did.
For me, I want to get out of here. Staying here is not what I want. There's nothing here for me.
Teens in Attawapiskat today ask for help filling that nothingness with a wish list of things found in most Canadian communities.
Okay, so the backstory to there being nothing there for someone is Indigenous people have an Indigenous lifestyle. It's a traditional lifestyle based on, what do you call it? Subsistence living, which is like you do a little bit of farming, do a little bit of hunting, you do a little bit of this, you do a little bit of that, and that's your job. It's like being a homemaker. You're a life maker. You make your life. You don't need a job because that's your job. Pollution and exploitation has caused those jobs to dry up because the product isn't there, or they're not legally allowed to get at the product. So all of a sudden, people who have no reason to need jobs or need things to do, need sports or any of that, been cut off from everything that used to supply all those resources and supply all those experiences as part of colonialism and genocide. And so now they're like, well, we need something to do. Well, they need to have their access to their traditional lifestyle restored, which means white people changing what white people are doing. White people telling other white people, you actually have to stop doing this resource extraction in this area, or you actually have to clean up after yourself in this spot, or you actually have to stop polluting this river, or you actually have to remove this dump site that you left there, or something like that. So that the problem is, it means colonists, Canadians, white Canadians who are treaty people as well, having to actually change what they're doing and take a hit, and also foot the bill for basically Canada is an agreement. It's a licensing agreement where the colonists get the right to exploit resources that the indigenous people don't traditionally have any relationship with, and so in a way that doesn't disrupt the traditional way of life, and to pay for somebody's entire life if their lifestyle is disrupted by colonial activity. So the idea of wringing our hands over how we can afford to subsidize these people's lives, these people should be getting the ultimate social benefits package, because that's what Canada is. It's an agreement to provide the ultimate social benefits package for people who have been expected to give up their entire way of life. So it's kind of like, okay, we're not going to fuck with your way of life, but if in case we do, we'll pay for your life, we'll pay for your food. So basically all these people should be getting all their needs completely provided for by the government, and the government's of course not willing to do that, because I mean, Canada has some conflict of interest issues where it was founded on one idea but with the intention to accomplish another. It was founded on the idea of, we're going to license this stuff and we're going to pay licensing fees basically, but with the plan to just take over and steal. So we're in the middle of this kind of, we're at the end of this sort of basically a failed genocide attempt, and the current white society isn't really into it as such. So I've got to figure out how to get from here to a place where we're actually honoring what Canada is supposed to have been set up as, which means for the moment simply providing for all these people's needs, which are more than measurable, and also giving them access to their traditional way of life, which means no pollution and big time cleanup. So those two things are going to cost Canada a tremendous amount of money, and that's money that, hey, if Canada hasn't made that much money off of it, if Canada isn't making that deal pay for itself, then it was a bad deal to make, and that's Canada's loss. But Canada basically is responsible for that failure. If if Canada's going to end up spending more on social, on subsidizing people's lives, then it has been able to recoup through exploiting, doing the exploitation that caused their lives to have to be paid for, then that's Canada's problem. And that's, you take a risk when you do capitalist stuff. You take a risk, and so these folks don't have clean water or decent food. They're starving, and they're living in an impossible living situation. So, and that's the situation that Canada has custom designed for them and set up with them, in complete contravention of our the documents that formulated Canada as a political entity. So this is my problem with this sort of wish list of this is what we want. It's like there's in other places in Canada, people are setting up hockey programs for people on reservations and stuff, and just with the assumption oh, these kids just don't have something to do. Their lives have been taken away. They need a life. They need the necessities of life, not some kind of program that's supposed to simulate what somebody would be able to choose for themselves if they had the necessities of life. So that's my problem.
An arcade, a cinema, a library, and something special, a meeting with the Prime Minister. Their request echoed by the protesters in Toronto.
We're demanding that Justin Trudeau get on a plane immediately and go to Ottawa, Piscat.
All right, so, oh god damn it, this stupid player is so stupid. So,
their request
these
echoed
people,
by the protesters in Toronto.
We're demanding that
this woman and her husband are big time activists in Toronto for a few different social justice causes, but they have supported Indigenous rights for years. They've been like heavy lifters in Toronto on the front lines. And so it is so cool to see them get on the news, on the national news. There's been a few national news. There's been a few different news things, but I think this is the best one. The other ones were little blips I found here and there. But these guys actually got good coverage, and when it was time to deliver their message, they were able to do that. And you can see Kathy's got a little bit of bruising on the forehead there, and we'll have to find out whether that's maybe some baby vomit, or that's maybe a little bit of roughage from getting digested by police officers. But I'm so proud of as an activist myself, sort of as kind of an activist. I'm so proud of these activists for taking over this spot and for having the message ready to deliver and for getting this kind of exposure. This is so great. Their timing was great and everything.
that's Justin Trudeau get on a plane immediately and go to Ottawa, Piscat.
For now, Justin Trudeau is letting his cabinet ministers handle the Ottawa-Piscat situation. But with worldwide attention focused on this growing crisis, that may change soon. Lisa.
All right, Glenn McGregor on Parliament Hill tonight on the suicide crisis. Thanks, Glenn. There was
Suicide crisis. Yeah, it takes children killing themselves. It really does to make change. It either takes adults killing children, or children killing other children, or children killing themselves. This is what makes social change. That's how crazy we are as a species.
The Ottawa-Piscat First Nation.
Finally, democracy now picked this up. I'm so glad to see Amy Goodman rocking this. Go, Amy.
In Ottawa saw 28 suicide attempts last month within a population of 2,000 people, and 11 attempts on Saturday alone. Activists with Black Lives Matter and Idle No More movements occupied the Toronto offices of a government Indigenous Affairs agency Wednesday, while another group of activists staged a sit-in at the agency's Winnipeg office Thursday evening. A Mexican woman has been reunited with her 2 U.S. citizen children.
So, yeah, a little bit of a mention from Amy Goodman, and I can't wait to see more from the press carrying this, picking this up. And the other thing is, Shanger is back. Actually back. D. Shanger, who published a whole bunch of did a whole bunch of live streaming during Occupy Toronto, is back behind the lens.
Do you know anybody downstairs in there?
Yeah, really chill. Yeah.
And so he's actually bringing a lot of, like, right on the spot, often live stuff. So that's where I would go if I were you, to see how things are going. D. Shanger's Ustream broadcast. And looking forward to watching this. Hopefully I'll make it down to this spot in Toronto and participate. If you do want to go there and put some pressure on the government now or even after this is over, go for it. I think it's 25 St. Clair East here in Toronto. 8th floor? I think it's the 8th floor.